Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect.
How are you doing?
Good,
It's
good.
really nice to see you. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. I remember
Wh-
we ran into you at the Halifax airport, maybe? We ran into you at me and Chris ran into you. Had a good chat.
oh, that's right. That's right. Family in tow. Was
Yeah.
that?
Oh, that's right. Those days.
Yeah, it was like, were you going to like Australia or something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Chris, my bandmate, is like a bandmate, but also does our tech, also does all my personal tech, and also travels with my family to like help with suitcases and everything. So I forgot about that. I forgot that Chris was, yeah.
Everything. It's amazing when the family dynamic becomes the touring dynamic, how everybody has to join in on the fun. Like it doesn't work otherwise. Like
Yeah.
you can't avoid it. It becomes everybody's thing as a
I,
unit.
I know, I feel bad. I'm like, okay, guys, like I'm having a kid, so you're all having a kid.
Yeah,
Twice
exactly.
as hard on.
But aren't you lucky? I mean, don't you feel lucky to have these people in your band that just kind of roll with it and are like, I don't know. I just feel so. I mean, I had those tours early on too, and it was just like I think about Alan and Kyle with my little baby there and Nina there, and just how much it was part of our lives for those months.
It's I feel very lucky, and like, yeah, those relationships with bandmates are, as adults you don't get to be you don't get to have sleepovers with your friends, but
Yeah.
with your bandmates you do. So it's like a level of childhood closeness. And it's even like the other day, not the other day, a few months ago, I hurt my leg. My wife was super pregnant, and that we had an IKEA delivery that was so big, and I was like, oh, I need my drummer. So I called my drummer. I was like, can you come over and just lift this a few flights of stairs? Like, that was my first response, was just like, we need my band here.
It's amazing. I mean, that's the thing is we need support in our lives.
Yeah,
We just need that. It's amazing. And when you find the right people and you realize that it's not necessarily if they can be wonderful musicians, it's amazing. But there is more to the job, especially when you're out on the road for weeks on end. There's so much
yeah,
about camaraderie and support and friendship and that kind of stuff that is like the stuff that really makes the difference.
totally. And I hired Chris before I knew how good he was. Like I got a sense of his personality, and I was like, okay, I need that in the van. I need that in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely super important.
So he's been great to have in the band.
He's been great. I just had this feeling about him the first second I saw him. I literally, it was before I knew he had long hair. I didn't know if he was a boy or a girl. I didn't know if I assumed he played keyboard. Apparently, my show was the first time he'd ever played keyboard. He was a bass player, but I had seen him on like a bass synth on stage, and I was like, oh, I like how that guy moves, and um, he's very performance driven.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I need that in my band. And then called him. He had never been on a plane. He had never been east of Winnipeg, never been on a plane with an instrument, and was like nervously explaining that he doesn't play keyboard. He's like, I don't play, but my girlfriend is a piano player and she's sort of teaching me some voicings. I was like, sure, let's do it. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and
And
he's
he
been,
said, "Yeah, sure, I'm up for it. I'm down."
yeah, and he's been
So
we did a tour in Europe where he played drums. Like, he just is up for anything.
you can tell he's a heavy musician, just
He's
ready
really
to
good.
go deep on it. It's so great.
Yeah, he's really good.
And so, who did you see him playing with?
Just a band, Gabby Geneva, so like a pop act from Vancouver.
Okay.
They were opening for us in Winnipeg. So he was like the opening act. I'm always too nervous to watch the opening act, but I want to get a
Yeah.
sense of the crowd. So I kind of popped out and just saw like Chris rocking out and this whole band. Did you ever notice, like, in the East Coast we have so many talented like songwriters and players, and on the West Coast they have this performance talent where they show up
Interesting.
with like a video crew and nice clothes and dance moves, and I'm like, can we just combine these two things? Like, they'd be all superstars.
That is such a funny thing. That's I hadn't really thought about it, but it's true. I mean, we are particularly nervous about performance.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't
I'm
want to like draw too much attention or
That's
something.
it. That's it. We don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves. There is like an inherent modesty, I think, that is celebrated, and that
Yeah.
seems immodest in some ways. But the problem is that when you're in entertainment, you want to see excitement and energy.
Yeah, I think we're doing like a disservice to ourselves when we try to be too modest just to just for fear of not fitting in back home or something, or like not.
Right.
I definitely have that. I don't know if it's from being from the East Coast or Canadian, or I never know what it's from. My upbringing, being female, I'm always like, why do I feel like, even with like, I don't know if you are like this with your awards. I know you've won a ton of awards and have like platinum, multi-platinum plaque and all that. Like Corey LaRue came over and saw my things in a corner and he was like, that's making me really sad. And he was like, he put them up and now I have to use this corner because I can't, it's different because I know you, but if I'm meeting someone in a Zoom, right, and I have my awards behind me, I'm like, when I see someone else, I love it. I'm like, oh my God, you wrote that song? I love it. And I can't have that person think that I think I'm so important. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. Literally, I took my platinum record down from my background.
Ria
I
Isabel.
literally did the same thing. I had one, and I'm super excited about it. I don't know how many I'm gonna get. It was an amazing memory, an amazing moment. And then all of a sudden, but I just moved it. I moved it into like a room, and I do struggle with that because I find the same as you said. I love seeing it when I'm in someone else's room. I'll go right to it, and I'm like, "Wow, wow, you did that! I love that song," or it starts these things. But I had the same tendency. I had the same. My kids found some of the awards at home, and they were like horrified. They were horrified that I didn't have them out. They were
Right.
like, part of me is I want to be future oriented.
I know what you mean. You don't want to say like if you put everything up, then that's the all you did, and then you know what I mean? Is
I
that what
kind
it
of like the square one, like start from square one every time you start working kind of thing.
really?
But I don't know if that's just an excuse because I'm scared. I had friends in 2 weeks ago, and they basically made fun of the platinum record because it was totally that moment. They're like, guys I went to school with were drinking beer in my studio, you know what I mean? And like immediately they kind of like poked fun at the platinum record, and then I took it down.
No, it's so weird. What a weird thing. Because yeah, when you see it with someone else's, I'm always happy and excited to see everyone else's achievements. So there's no rhyme or reason to
No,
how
no,
you
no.
feel.
I'm glad we're having this chat. It's making me feel better. I think it actually does address a major thing about how we sit culturally
Yeah,
with regards to modesty and these kind of achievements and where you kind of how to manage them. It's like really really interesting. It also kind of ties to your career in an interesting way. Kind of some of the things I was hoping we could talk about because you had a career pre pop music that
right.
had a different set of like a different set of that modesty was important. Like singer songwriter music is about like earnesty,
Yeah,
sincerity.
yeah.
Pop music is about
Bottle.
confidence.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, these, and it was interesting to see you make that transition, but also to see you like I think succeed in that transition. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure there was like a little bit of like, okay, how do I do this and still be me?
yeah,
Can we talk about that? Because of course it didn't happen quick. You wrote a lot of songs, you did a lot of shows,
yeah.
but the transition to like pop, commercial radio recognition and Canadian recognition did happen quite quickly.
Yeah, like literally overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was and still is a lot of pushing through uncomfortable moments. In terms of that, I think the maritime like sensibility really helped me in terms of so much of the behind the scenes of music is meeting people. I have to, like for the song Bend, I was just telling someone I did a 6 week radio tour. So I don't have my band with me. I'm just visiting stations for 6 weeks. And
Wow.
so that's a lot of like, if you're not comfortable being like, oh, hi, Eric. Yeah, no, I'm Ria. This is my story. And then sitting in a boardroom with their sponsors and their staff and sometimes their staff's children and kind of like just relating to people on a human level. Like, I feel like I was like, oh, I have a bit of a superpower from being from the Maritimes. Like, I know how to talk to people and I'm not coming in there being like, give me my green room, and
Yeah, yeah.
I need my warm water. I'm just being like, whatever is easy for you guys, let's do it. And but then on the flip side, I can't help but wonder if things, if I grew up somewhere else, would I be able to really own, even on social media, really own that like confidence more and be like, again, the same thing with the plaques. Like when I go down to the States and I see how American musicians are and how they can sell themselves, I love it. Think, I've never once been like, what an egomaniac, unless they are. But I'm like, oh wow, like yeah, they're just telling you exactly what they've done and how talented they are, and that it does not offend me. But for me, like, it is really hard to do that. So I think it's just a constant pushing through because I think an audience wants to see, for me anyway, I gravitate towards artists that are hold themselves in ways that I wish I could. You sort of
Yeah.
have to be a little bit your best self so that someone's like, oh, maybe I could try that or I could be that confident today. But it's not always easy. That's like the work of everything, is like the mental game of it for me.
Well, it's so hard because it kind of like if it's not real, it has to be real.
Real, yeah.
Like if it's not real, then it is like a giant burden to carry.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like if you're going through every day and you feel like you're faking it,
Right.
you're being someone that you're not when you're on stage, or you feel like you're being someone you're not when you're doing those interviews. It's really an enormous burden, I
Yeah.
think, and can really
Yeah.
break people. We see it. It's an extremely difficult thing to wear. And so but I always admired the fact that when I was watching you go through those stages, I felt like I was still watching you.
Well, that's good.
It didn't feel like even when I watched you on stage and your movements became more confident, and it's not like you were then going, okay, I need to dance like. It was like,
Right.
okay, how do I get on a stage and like properly occupy the space of a stage without a guitar? I got
Yeah.
nothing, all of a sudden you were moving around. And again, like there's not that many people we know out here that do this.
Yeah. And
And
that's
it's a,
not easy to do. Like, I'm not one of those people that could come on. I would see people every once in a while come on stage in Halifax. Usually they're from away and just own the stage. Like, or like, Jordan. I saw him at an award show. Doesn't even have the DJ on stage with him. There's just tracks running, an empty stage. And he's like, you want the good life? And he's just confident. And I remember being like, I'm going to try to like do a song with Quake Matthews and not die of embarrassment for the 30 seconds I'm on stage with no guitar. And then I
yeah,
just had to keep pushing. I remember one time I had already been signed to Sony and touring, but still holding the guitar. And then we were in Newfoundland and people kept bringing shots to the stage. So by the time the encore came, I was drunk. Like one of the only times I've done this, by the way. And my drummer, Chuck Bucket at the time, looked at me and just pressed Gold, the tracks for Gold, a song we've been rehearsing with no guitar, but I had never played live. And I looked at him like I was like, I'm gonna fucking kill. Like he looked at me like you're gonna kill me, and I was like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And I went up and I just did it. And luckily there was like one of those bars on the stage, you can kind of rest your hand for a second or look in the audience. And yeah, it didn't. That stuff did not come natural at all. That was part of the fun of getting more and more comfortable to the point now where like I think I play guitar for like 3 songs on stage
right.
and it's wonderful. I love it. I feel so much more free when it's not there. And like, even if I have extra layer of clothing on, I don't like it anymore. Like I used to be like, my weight always fluctuates. Like I think I'm a little bit chubby. Maybe I'm not. Now I'm like, I can't even go there. I have to wear a t-shirt. Like I can't do the cover up layers thing. Cause
Wow.
that go back to the old me.
But yeah, interesting. It's interesting because we think about it as being like, it's that confidence versus overconfidence, and as you said, egomania. We kind of think of it as being like an ego thing, but sometimes it's actually just about a comfort. Like when
Yeah.
you get rid of that guitar is essentially like it's that protection between you and the audience. It gives your hands something to do. It
Yeah.
gives your nervous energy somewhere to go. So
Yes.
like calming that nervous energy in order to like direct it towards your performance and your, like I always find that interesting with when I work with Classified, and you've worked with Classified lots too. I would kind of think the show was going well when I was playing by myself with my band. And we've all talked about this. We're all playing our guitars. We're playing whatever, like folk music or whatever we play.
Yeah.
And we're rocking along and the crowd's I'm going, yeah, this show's going awesome. And then Luke comes out and I'm like, oh, there's a whole other gear.
There's a whole game.
There's a
Yeah.
whole other gear. Like I thought I was at 10 and I was at 6.
Yeah.
And now I'm seeing, and it's partially because he goes right up, he exposes himself fully to, that energy is like, as you said with Jordan, I remember seeing Jordan the same thing. I thought the exact same thing when I saw Jordan. I was like, look at that. Look how beautifully he moves. his confidence. He's not hiding. He's not
Yeah.
even like even the postural stuff. I've had to work really hard on just not slouching and kind of like hiding behind my frame.
Yeah. Behind my frame. I relate so much. It's like I really feel, yeah, that did not come naturally to me, and it's so funny because it's so subtle. Like someone that's not a performer might look at someone playing guitar and look at someone singing and be like, there's no distance between that. It's just putting the guitar down. But for some people, you and I apparently, it's like, yeah, it can be a real journey of trying and trying. Yeah, it has to become normal. Like when you, I've been playing guitar since I was 14, so it's when I'm singing, it's just I'm playing guitar. Even that whole album I recorded with Classified, he had to put a guitar on me, not playing, just to sing the
Yeah.
track. I couldn't sing naturally without it.
Wow. So all those tracks you
Yeah,
had it there. You weren't necessarily playing it, but you had it in your hands.
yeah, just holding it, and it was his idea because he was like, "Why do you sing good with that song and you can't hit these simple notes?" I'm like, "Sorry, I just feel weird standing. Like, can we sit?" And he's like, "No, you shouldn't sit. Just let me put the guitar on you." So he just like literally like a prop, and I
Right.
could like hold it and squeeze into the high notes, and
Yeah. And so what was the work like when you got rid of that guitar? Was that self-driven or were there people that helped you out kind of shaping that comfort on stage? I've always wondered what that process is like.
Yeah, I think it's like there was there was no one that helped me out per se. It's just like forcing myself to do it a few times in a way of like, if I don't do this, if I can't get past this, what's the point? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing?
Right.
This is not hard. Like, I had to tell myself like, you can't walk out on your own stage. And I think another part is like being afraid of what happens if I get there and don't know what to do. And then when that moment finally happens and it's not as scary as you think, it's it's just is what it is. And yeah, I don't know. It's also just, I guess, getting more confident too with myself, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think that fear is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Confidence and fear probably go together pretty heavily. Like as you say, you're kind of like once you face what you're scared of, when the thing that you're most scared of you realize is quite surmountable, like it happens and you survive.
That's the thing too. Like I was playing in these singer-songwriter venues and always being like, oh, if I can just get my music out, like I know I could be on these pop stages. And it's almost like, and then the universe is like, well, here you go. And I'm like, am I gonna fail myself? Like, it's just gonna be like, oh no, it's too hard. I can't do it. I have to go home. Like I couldn't let that happen. It was like,
Right, you were determined. I love that. I love that because I do wonder sometimes the speed at which things happen. Sometimes I think, when you see a really young artist, like you, I'm sure in many ways you were grateful for having had those years of experience
oh God,
playing
yeah.
as a singer songwriter because you think about, say, you were 18 and that just like boom, it was that overnight same momentum, but you didn't have those years of performance. It would be and life experience and knowledge of yourself, and it would
Yeah.
be so scary.
It would be so, I'm so thankful all the time for, I remember I got onto the house concert circuit. I remember people were doing house concerts a lot. And at the time, it's like, you can make like, I forget, good money. Like, compared to like playing for 20 bucks at a venue or like for a beer, and then you get like 1,500 bucks for a house show. So I was putting them every weekend and just talking to people. And I've always been, I'm still this way. Like, when people are like, he play a 90-minute set. I'm like, I can do 70 and talk for 20, like, so I just started working that muscle with house concerts. And now it's like, there's always a tech issue or something that happens on stage where you have to stop. And that can be a moment of, it could be terrifying for some people. I've seen some people just crawl into themselves and go from confident to like, get me out of here. And when that happens for me, I have this little thing. I'm like, here we go. This is me. Like,
Yeah, right.
the thing that's hard just stopped and this is easy. And I think that really helps with the fear too on stage, because it's like the worst thing that could happen is, we're running tracks and lights that are synced and all these moments. The worst thing that could happen is all that goes away and I can still impress them because I can still play guitar and talk to them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're so lucky with that. You have that gear that's there available.
Almost like, come on, give me a tech, please give me a tech issue tonight. Like something just to
Wow.
pull myself. Like, so just having that little thing inside, I think helps with the confidence too.
That's it to know that it's I mean, I think that one of the most terrifying things as a performer and I mean, I think in most of our lives is silence.
Mm.
You know, it's uncomfortable. Like it's one of those things. Like I'm really trying to get more comfortable with space and silence. And on stage is one
Yeah.
of those places where it's most apparent. Like I don't even drink water on stage.
In those in between moments.
There's just there's so much nervous energy in my body that it is like a freight train. I love it. I love entertainment. I love the stage,
Yeah.
but I'm really trying to work on like it's okay to breathe. It's okay to have some because it's unsustainable. It's like as you said, like not being afraid of a little gap in space or a tech issue that's going to create that space is a game changer.
But also in the same breath, like as you're saying that, I relate in my songwriting. Like I have so many words in my songs. I don't have those cool moments where I'm like, and something, something, and I'm just like chilling in the moment. Like I'm so afraid to lose the audience,
Yeah.
like in a such an insecure way. Like in my head, if I take sips of water a lot, but not I would never do it after a song ends and before another one begins. I would do it like when all the attention's on Chris. I'm already playing it out 2 minutes ago. That's my water break. No one can see me. Like, because it's like I am so afraid like to lose the audience that I'm making these songs that are like, and if you're gonna change the station, no, you can't, because then this other part comes so
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm coming good. Like it's insane. And I now know that I don't have to do that. And co-writing has been really good for that. When I've had other co-writers be like, "Whoa, I don't think we need to do that," and I'm like, "Oh, like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
That's oh, I totally know. I mean, I think that's kind of part of. It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same thing. It's like this. It's like as you said, this. You're scared of losing people's attention,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's the same thing when
terrifying.
you're on stage. It's the same kind of thing. I think about this, in conversation. The same kind of thing. It's like when you're trying to make sure that you have everybody. It's it's like again, it's fear. It's like you're working from like a place of fear rather than confidence. And confident people can kind of be like, "Oh yeah, let's let this vibe friggin' ride out because it's I know it's so good that
Yeah,
I don't even need to sing.
yeah.
You're still going to be with me in 30 seconds because this is so good." And I'm like, I wish I had, but here's another part. Like, here's,
Well, it's also because your shows are so incredible. I think that's the reason why, like, and this is hard to explain to people who don't perform, but like, when you have an audience and you know when you don't. You know when a few of them are bored. I think we'll never know if it's all in our heads or not, but like, I know when I have an audience and I feel like I know when the energy drops in a room and what to do. Like I'm not going to play if we were supposed to play two songs in a row that were mid tempo and people are getting restless. I look at Chris and like, no, we're doing acoustic. Like let's get them back. And like I feel like that's what yeah, it's like your shows are not there's no boring it's not like oh David's doing a fucking 4 minute guitar solo again. Like yours are you're so engaged and you know this one and then you're introducing the story and then I feel like it's part of that. Like it's you need that maybe.
well, I think it probably I have a really short attention span.
Same.
So I'm like particularly sensitive to the audiences. I don't want to say I just assume that they have as short an attention span as I do. But you don't want to over assume. You don't want to uh, or not like, underestimate.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that sometimes that filling of the space, like I've seen great performers, I've seen great performers that I like, and there's a way to be on stage that isn't necessarily filling all of the space all
Yeah.
the time. Like there's this,
100%.
and it's also this like knowledge of self and comfort, as you said. Like it speaks to one thing that is your new music, because I was just listening to your new music that you just put out, which is really exciting. And I really that old me song, it kind of speaks to exactly what we're talking about, right? Is like you're like I could win awards from pretending. That I think is what you say in that line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and there's what's the next line is what's that the next line after that is oh yeah, you asked me how I'm feeling and my
Uh,
tongue gets tied,
yeah,
or
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
like you
Hold my
can't
hold my
be
tongue. Yeah.
yeah, you hold your tongue because you don't really want to like it's this weird balance of, and that's more what I mean by the burden. It's like you want to be confident, but if you feel like if you can't totally expose yourself, but if you don't expose yourself, then you're like you're not being real, and then it's an impossible pursuit.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the hard part too, eh? Of knowing there's so many I feel like there's so many like careful balancing acts that you do as a maybe just as a person, but as a performer and as a writer, it's like to try to be as vulnerable and honest as possible without being those people that spill too much or doing TMI on stage. And it's like you don't know though, like where's the line? And it's constantly like, God, why did I say that? Like I did a whole like almost an album that I scrapped this pandemic because I think it was TMI. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna be one of those people that finally really says what I think. And then I gave it a couple months and listened back, and I was like, that's too much, and no one wants that. It wasn't good. But I don't know. It's a balancing act. That song though is so funny. We moved back to Halifax mid pandemic or a few months in, and every time I'd come back from Toronto to Halifax, I would feel just this nice confidence. Like I'd be there for 2 or 3 days. You'd run into old friends or someone would like recognize me and I'd be like, this is great. Love Halifax, miss it every day. And then as soon as I kind of got back for a few weeks, I'm running into like the outskirts of people that I don't really keep in touch with and people that like an old crush that didn't like me back, like people that trigger me in ways I'm like, I thought I was over this and I'm not. I just ran away from it. Like so many like things would come up and I'd just be like, oh God, these like gross feelings. And I was talking with Ria Isabel, who we both write with and love, and she was just like, dude, there's a song in that, and came up with this. We were in Tim Horton, like we ordered our coffee at Tim Hortons, and before we paid for it, we had the chorus.
Wow.
What she's so good for me. Like I was just at her house yesterday telling her like for me, she's just my like she can really see me and know what I like and put it into words. And yeah, so that song for me was like as soon as I wrote it, I was like, okay, that's how I feel. That's the homecoming song for me is like I'm dealing with these old things that I ran away from that I thought I dealt with. And so I feel like that song encapsulates that.
That's so interesting. It's interesting. Do you feel like you've dealt with them now? Like, do you feel like actually being home has been good? Like,
Yeah.
or would it have better just to stay away?
Anyway, well, who knows? I think it's good in some ways. There, part of me was scared I was gonna fall into a hole of like where I was mentally. Like I am also living like a block away from where I was when I got the record deal. And like so it's very all these memories are here and it's like a cool like reminder of how far things have come, but it's also like I'm like in the same place in many ways. And I think that space has been good. I was just listening to the Mo Kenny episode you did, which I loved, and I love Mo. And I didn't have an experience of like drinking and becoming sober, but I just have not been drinking as much. And little kids at home and trying to. I had some health issues I've finally been focusing on and getting through, so a little more focused on nutrition and yeah, my thoughts are coming back and able to deal with things a little clearer. There's a big section of my life that I don't write about and don't like talking about, like from childhood, that I think I'm kind of able to dig into and be like, oh, I feel insecure about this person because their personality reminds me of this. So in those ways I think I've done a lot of good work on myself, maybe.
Yeah, that's amazing. The reason I ask is because, of course, I live in Fredericton. I drop my kids off at the same elementary school I went to.
Right.
I see my parents' friends every day. You know what I mean? The office beside my studio is owned, is rented by a guy I went to kindergarten with.
That,
So it is like I feel the same way. I was really scared that it was going to be some sort of like stasis. It was going to be like the end of my development. That's what I was scared. I saw those same things, and I loved growing up here. I have a lot of things but it was more about like I've always been very forward thinking, tried to be a growth. I keep my focus on personal growth and growth of what I'm doing in my work and my relationships and all these kind of things. And I felt like I was really scared of that this would represent a return or like a move back, and it
Yes.
would and the end, like an end.
Yep.
And
I
I
feel
didn't want an end. I want another beginning. I want another beginning, right? And so what you're saying is, and I think it's been a similar experience, is where you're like, I think some of my fears were not founded, and
yeah,
some of the things that it had nothing to do with the place. It had a lot to do with me
right.
and my perception of where I was or what I'm doing or what it means to be in a certain physical environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel like you've like was the fear like also losing your identity as a like going back going back to where you were before you left Fredericton? Like do you forget that you're a musician some days? I do.
Oh yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I kind of like it. You know, people sometimes say like, "Oh, is it funny to be in Fredericton as a musician?" You know that, and I'm kind of, well, they knew me before.
Yeah.
So there's this weird relationship where I think that it's kind of, there's something comforting about them knowing me as me. They knew me they know me because of my parents or because of one of many of my brothers or whatever. So there's this kind of like sincerity there that I appreciate. Whether
Yeah.
whether they understand my career or even think that it's a real career.
Yeah.
Like I explained my career to someone yesterday at the park, and they literally laughed at me. Like they were like, "What does that? What does that mean?" Like I was like, "I sing songs." Like, and they were like, "Well, where? Like, where do you sing? What do you mean you sing?" Like,
Yeah.
but it's just one of those things that
Yeah.
it's an alternative. We do an alternative career. I
Yeah.
think it's important to be reminded of that.
100%. Like, cause I think it's so important to be like in order to be able to explore new parts of yourself and like ways of presenting yourself. It's like you need to know the North Star. And for me, like since I've come home, I've my all my high school friends have rekindled and joined this like Facebook Messenger group. So there's like nine of us, like nine girls, and it's so normal. It's like I went to Dubai a few weeks ago, and people are like, "Oh, I finally got that raise at my job." Like, "Oh, good work, Becca." "Oh yeah, no, I did. My kid just got into the. Oh, good work." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to Dubai next week." They're like, "Oh, good work. Do you need an extra mask?" I'm like, "Oh, I think I'm good." And then it's not like, "Oh, Ria does music and they do normal things." It's very just like, who cares? And I think that is really good to yeah, I feel like I have a strong sense of self, but I can also get lost like I get lost every 6 months and I go, wait, why did I write these three songs and buy this shirt? This is not me. And I feel like I do really benefit from being brought back to reality,
Right.
who I am.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a really important. I mean, it's one of it's the great the great challenge is being grounded but ambitious. You don't want to lose your ambition. You want to be an ambitious person, and I see really ambitious people, and forward thinking and open and excited and curious people in all sorts of professions here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There might not be and there are great musicians too, but it's more that you just, as you said, your job just becomes kind of like one of many, especially like you're primarily basically a parent,
Yeah.
and then there's other things that you do to make it all work
Yeah. That's
at the
right.
same time.
That's right.
I felt like that really did change when I had kids. Is that it was really like there was a clear delineation between, okay, well, this is like kind of my. I've never had a space. I've never had a space outside the house, and now I have a space. I literally walk to work now. That just
Yeah.
started.
Wow. How's that?
It's been a challenge, but I think it's healthy.
Yeah. To have a
I,
separation and not hear like a kid crying and then feel guilty that you're working on a song or something.
oh yeah, and I soundproofed my
Like,
room at home, and it didn't work. It wasn't soundproof enough.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just being able to just a little separation and everything else. But I mean, it's definitely a challenge. How is the, as much as you want to get into it, being a musician and a parent, how much has that changed your vibe? Obviously, it changes a lot, but
Yeah, I think like the big thing for me is how classified we both work with him. He's like on a schedule every day. Like he really works Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday. He starts at a certain time every day to do his emails, then he starts his session, then he does whatever. He's always done by dinner. I always thought I would die if I had a schedule. Like I'm the opposite of him in that way. Like if I work 2 days, I need to do the next night. I can't I'm not consistent in any way. And the kids thing has really made forced me to say, okay, I'm going to take Tuesday and Wednesday to write instead of being like, oh, I just feel like writing now,
Yeah.
which has been like a learning curve, but it's good. I find it really helpful to get out of what you think your crutches are, like with writing. Like for a long time my crutch was drinking and writing. Like I didn't start, like when I lived in Montreal and before I met Sarah, it was like I would get a bottle of wine and I was going to write a new song that night. And it's like I got out of that crutch, so I know that's possible. And then, having to figure out this new space where I'm taking these 3 or 4 hour chunks and writing downstairs when sometimes I can hear the family. It's definitely not been easy, but I think I got to the next. I think I got rid of that crutch that I thought I had, which was I need to be free and only write in the exact moment. Where it's like, no, there's things you can do to spark creativity, and especially when you have your little place set up. I find that when I sit down at my desk, I'm back to where I was if I'm halfway through a song, because I'm remembering the half a can of Zevia sugar-free soda, and I'm remembering the headphones are there. So I kind of, and that is a challenge. I think that's you have to just put a little more work to get into the creative space, maybe for me anyway. But it definitely changes things. Fuck, it's like hilarious. Like right, like even just like doing sessions here is so hard because our time zone is so far apart from everyone else. So like I'm 4 hours away from LA and Vancouver, where all my sessions almost are, if they're not in the UK. So I'm like, can you start at 12 my time? And they're like, no, I'm not starting at 8 a.m. And I'm like, okay, because my son gets home at 4:30. I'm like, okay, just trying to figure things out, in that way. But it's a good problem to have, maybe to have a
Yeah,
career.
well, I think you're right. I think one thing that really resonates is the crutch thing.
Yeah.
It's really tough to go through a major change when you're relying on creative inspiration
Mm.
because you feel like, well, the creative inspiration is related to this place or having had some drinks or smoked some weed or whatever. Like there's these things that you kind of associate with writing or you know what I mean, and or your creativity, that your source of creativity is because, and I am terrified because it's scarce. We all know how scarce it is. It's scarce. It's not easy just to write songs. We don't know when it's going to run out. Every time I write a song, I think it's the last one.
Yeah.
It's like this super scarce, mysterious well
Yeah.
that we don't know how much water is in. And all of a sudden, someone throws you a new bucket, and you're like, "Are you sure there's still going to be water down there?"
Yeah.
Because I've been using this bucket for years. You know what I
A
mean?
bucket. Yeah, that's like the thing too, and I really, it's so funny because you see people sometimes have kids or just whatever, get older or any reason and stop doing music, even just because it's too hard mentally, like the business of it. And I always really looked up to people that, with or without kids, like a Jan Arden or a Classified, or people that just keep going. And how many changes has Class seen in his career with like formats, or I just saw he's on TikTok too. Like he just keeps evolving and working past the discomfort that probably happens with every new era, whether it be parenthood or Instagram or Spotify. And I really admire that. So I think I make that a little game too, to be like, all right, well, I want a family. I've always wanted kids, like non-negotiable. I kind of want 5 kids, but I'm not going to. Um, I need to do that. I need to do music as well. A big thing too is like, yeah, I had this kind of like long COVID, but it was like long mono, and I had it since I did this European tour in 2017, and then just never recovered from how sick I got after for years,
Wow.
and would have to like some days, like I could do one thing, I could like take the garbage out, and then I would have to go to bed, and it would come in like these 2 month. It would be like on for 2 months off, and I never could just get on. I'm not a very organized person. Like I just was like, oh God, I'll stop drinking for a week maybe, or I'll stop eating this. And I feel like now, with when you're a parent and you're run a business, you just need every minute of the day. And I feel like that's been the positive. It's like, okay, I need to just be healthy. so that every minute, you don't want to be like, okay, the kids are in bed and then fall asleep. You want to say the kids are in bed, I got 4 hours, let's do it. You know what I mean? So like
I've,
that has been a positive. Not everyone has a reason to sort of really dial back their health in that way. And like having months and months of like, I cut out every food, brought it back in one by one, you know, naturopath, everything, just did everything to see what the issue was. And so in that way, I'm like, if I didn't have this crazy job and have kids, maybe I wouldn't have thought to focus that hard on it. It might have lasted another 10 years. So
and what did it look like? What did focusing on it look like?
focusing on it looked like, well, there's that guilt thing, right? When there's two parents, like I can't have my wife doing, I can't have my only waking time be working on music and then going back to bed. It's like always the guilt that drives me. And being like, okay, so I went to a naturopathic doctor, is that what they're called? Naturopath. And just like had to go on antivirals. Kind of the same what people are doing when they have COVID now, that some people are unfortunate enough to have it last for a long time. Antivirals, and just my immune system was just attacking itself for years, thinking it was sick when it wasn't. And like I was in one tour, I ended up in the hospital in Kamloops, like pneumonia and all this. Like, so my manager, they had to cut me off from doing like meet and greets, which is like my favorite thing after a show. Like I go out every show and meet everyone. And I just love that. I find it really like cold to do a show and then just get back in the van. Couldn't do that anymore. All these things were like just, and it was getting worse and worse. And then finally, yeah, I just cut everything out of the diet, added a lot of supplements. I was a vegetarian for years and maybe wasn't getting enough vitamin B's, irons, just supplemented and just got back to a place. At one point, I had so much energy this one day, just a couple months after this program started. I went down, I felt like my toddler. I had my gym clothes on, I was going to do some exercising, and I just couldn't stop jumping. And then I started crying. And I ran upstairs, and Sarah was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "No, I have energy. I have energy." Like I hadn't been able to even move my muscles weren't healing at night. So like I would feel like I was climbing Mount Everest after 6 or 7 days of just walking around my house because my muscles wouldn't at night recover.
Wow. And so it was happening on tour, off tour, all the time.
Yeah, and I think my adrenaline on tour was helping me get
Yeah.
through it. Um, but luckily, my worst times were at home. Just luckily. But yeah, finally got through that. And it's honestly, I had a little bit of a kind of came back to visit about a month ago because we had a new baby, and
Oh,
the
wow.
stress can sometimes get you, going. But since like, yeah, it's been like a year and a half of like feeling really normal, like feeling like I did 6 years ago, which has been crazy,
Wow.
crazy cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel I relate to all of that very much. Very much. I got sick and didn't know what the heck was going on and
You were
did
sick.
much of the same things. Oh, I got so sick. Crazy facial hives and like
Right.
blowing up and just and like I thought I had an ulcer. Like I just couldn't. Everything was my body was just reacting against itself. It was just and so I one thing I get nervous about now is not really knowing how much it was tour. Like
Right.
I've been really good. It's been really good, but I also haven't been out for more than like I'm not out for these crazy trips like I was. Like that happened kind of after many years of kind of like attempting peak performance, at least for me, and I loved it. I was telling myself, how could this? Why is my body rejecting a profession I love so much? Right, like just like that meet and greet. Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean this is causing me stress? I love this. And
Yeah.
so, this year, obviously, the pandemic has meant that we're not doing those things. I've been able to regroup. I feel a lot better. But there is this little bit of me, quite a bit of me, that's so scared that some of that stuff's going to come back. Like I'm trying to like, again, like there's things I'm doing that, but I really am trying to be so deliberate in terms of like, okay, well then I want to be able to, because I'm like you, I admire people who go through these stages, right? Who
Mm.
it's being aware of the changes and addressing your needs accordingly to your family's needs, to your body's needs, and all these things. But then moving into the next decade, and
Yeah.
it's hard each decade. Like I talked to Julie Doiron recently, and saying that, like a music career is like a pyramid. There's a lot of people in the first decade. The second decade, there's fewer. Third decade, there's fewer. Fourth decade, there's very few people who have 4 decade careers. 5 decade, Julie's one of those people that she's into her into her fourth. She started when she was like 18. You know what I mean? It's quite amazing.
Wow.
But it's not to say it's not without its challenges. It's hugely challenging. But how do you maintain the spirit? Because as you said, you need to be able to sit down at that desk and you need to have that energy. It's almost all energy.
It's all energy, and that's all we are, is just like this weird body that we sit in. And
Sack of energy.
what did sack of energy? Did you change anything else other than stopping touring to heal yourself?
Oh, yeah, yeah, big time. I mean, I went to a therapist.
Okay, that'll do it.
Essential.
Right.
And then I have kind of like a fairly hefty spiritual practice of, meditation and reading. And so that's been a big part of it, is just kind of trying to like just deepen the pool of inner and outer knowledge. You know what I mean? Be more comfortable with myself.
Yeah.
Be more aware of actually what anxiety looks like, even when I'm enjoying something. That heightened sense of, excitement in my body, and how that can be really a great thing, but in other ways it can actually be very, it can wear me down. It's mostly about, again, it's more about like storing up that energy. What takes it away? What helps me? What gives me energy, and what takes it away? And then if I want to be that social person and be that person after the show, what do I need to do to make sure that between 8 and 10:30 or 11 o'clock, whenever I'm playing, I have all of that energy? What's the fuel?
Yeah.
Well, it probably means a fair amount of time by myself, a fair amount of time in a very quiet place,
Yeah.
Which aren't things that come naturally to me. I'll fill up the whole day.
Yeah, same.
Socializing, talking, doing the show, doing the after thing, then hanging out with my band, and then closing the hotel door, and then being like, why do I feel so exhausted?
I know. That's something I learned this pandemic, was because I'm so addicted to productivity, and it's such a big part of like my self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times, even like if we go on a family vacation, like by day 4 or 5, I'm feeling like a fail. I'm like, oh, well, this is why I'm not more successful, because I'm doing vacations for 6 days. Like that, this weird like thoughts come in, that one side of me is like, knows exactly what it is, and the other side is like just in this nonstop productivity. And I also have this like scarcity thing where no matter how much money's in my bank, I think I'm gonna be homeless in like a month. I think I'm gonna be. I have a real issue with money, and I'm a big saver. I'm not a big spender, and it's like it's been a big thing in the last few years. And what were we talking about? Because that's a whole other tree.
Well, we were just talking about social, like that like, having space, having energy to take care of those big moments,
Yeah. So the scarcity, So the money thing and the productivity, it's like I wouldn't say no to. I'd say yes to everything when it comes to work. So especially if it's like, if at least one thing is good about it. So maybe it's like pain. I have to be away from my family for 4 days, but it pays a ton of money, and I'm like, I was like, yes, of course. And it's also my manager's making money too. So I'm like, of course, you got me this. Yes. And just mid-pandemic, there was a company trying to get me to fly to Montreal instead of doing over Zoom. When at like the height of COVID, Sarah's pregnant. She hadn't got her vaccine yet. And they were just throwing more and more money at me. And I was like, oh my God, to fly for one day for this much money. And then I was just like, no, I can't it's not fair. I'm putting like, what if then next week Sarah's in the hospital and we lose the baby? You know what I mean? Like, just all these things where I'm like, nothing is that important. And like for me to feel and just to let it go and not feel sad about it. And it's hard. I struggle with trying to get as many things done in a day as possible. I don't, like, if I have an hour off, it's like, let's clean the house and take some things to storage. Let's, Sarah, your sewing machine, let me dust it. Like nonstop, to the point of like craziness. And when I hurt my foot a few months ago, like I had to stay on the couch for a week. It was the best week of my life. The house didn't fall apart. The family didn't fall apart. We weren't kicked. Like I just sat there and everything was fine. And maybe the house was a bit messy, but it was fine.
But yeah, it's
You
like the
know?
fear thing, right? It's like the greatest fear is that it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Like we're keeping this engine going, and the pandemic was one thing of just like it was like kind of like they dropped the no.
Yeah.
All of a sudden we didn't have to make those decisions, right? And so the productivity, when you define yourself by your productivity, which I relate to very much, I think most artists do, um, the pandemic was extremely difficult in a lot of ways because we were used to defining ourselves by our work and our work as being out, and all of a sudden we weren't doing that. And then, but the reevaluating what productivity is, I think, is like again part of this, like what I'm really trying to like. I'll have these moments. Thankfully, I have, my wife Nina is really good at identifying this, and she's like, "You literally write songs. You write more songs on vacation than you do at
Mhm.
home." Like, and that's not to say I'm actually not on vacation. I'm chilling.
Yeah.
I'm having fun. I'm with my kids. Like whatever. We're at a lake. We're swimming. But then give me a guitar after 5 days of being out, and all of a sudden a full song comes, and I'm like, wait, this is gone. This is like the most backdoor kind of way into my job. Our job is to write songs. So, however we get there, it doesn't. You don't necessarily
Yeah.
have to follow the traditional path of like grind,
Yeah.
grind, grind. Especially like I love this. It's a funny. It's like I love self help books, but like one of the big self help books is The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
Right.
Has a ridiculous title, but one of the things is this idea of sharpening the saw. And I really have I've always loved this metaphor. It's like unless you take time, you can be reefing on a saw on a tree, and if that saw isn't sharp, it doesn't matter how much work you're doing on the tree, it's not going to cut. You got to take that saw out every week, and you got to sharpen that saw, and then you're going to go, and it's going to be a lot more efficient. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of like making sure that you like
Yeah.
leave a bit of time to sharpen the saw. I wasn't doing anything. I was not sharpening the saw. I was just trying to be productive. And I think when you look at it from an efficiency perspective, it was probably super inefficient.
That's that's so funny you said that because I was just having a thought today about how we use our time, and it's so many things we think are productive. Like how many times have you done a tour that's like kind of break even and doesn't get you to another tour? Or how many times have you done something because I don't like there's so many things where like I'm being in some ways just as productive being at home and yeah, doing the vacation and sounds like your wife is like mine, like really good at seeing me. Like it sounds like she's like pointing out to you that oh no, you're creating here. You're not creating when you're stressed and you're in the studio by yourself for 4 days and nothing comes out. And then you feel shitty subconsciously, so you're in a bad mood and like I mean that's clearly my story, but it's like
And mine.
yeah, Sarah's really good at doing that for me or being like, I need to change scenery so much. I would always do like, I'm going to do a week in this place to write, or I'm going to do this. And having the same room every day has been a struggle. And she's really good to be like, why don't you just rent a place? Like, go to Chester. Why don't you go to,
Yeah.
she's always reminding me, like, just do this. And like, it's, yeah, it's good to have that outside opinion because you can't see it yourself sometimes.
Well, and I think is so much of the trick is that it's comparative. No matter what we think, we compare ourselves to other people. And so one thing about the pandemic is that no one's been on the road.
Mm,
So it's been easier to redefine what productivity looks for each of us. Because
sure.
ultimately, I think before the pandemic happened, we were looking at each other's Instagrams essentially and being like, ooh, they're on the road. I should be on the road.
Right.
I'm not working hard enough. Oh, look at them. They're working. They're getting all the, this is what we do. We still do it. I mean, it's the dangers of social media is like comparative,
Yeah.
constantly comparative, where what works for actual, real productivity, actually creation and energy, energy, let's just say, like having that curiosity and enthusiasm, which is what we all want and we all want to work with to maintain that looks probably pretty different for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how that, I've been wondering, it's some musicians are sort of starting back at touring again, especially Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of those feelings of like, oh my God, I need to be out there. when it's like, yeah, it's hard. It is hard not to compare. Um, it's a weird time. Like
Yeah.
everyone was at home. It was kind of fun until I realized that I wasn't being productive. Like people were starting to release like, you know, like Matt Mays released this album that he had written in like a few weeks, and then someone else, and I was like, oh, people are writing because I'm like terrified. Like I'm like buying everyone's toilet paper. Like I was like
Right.
terrified. I was like that person, and then I was like, okay, let's write, and then just not writing. Like couldn't figure it out, and then so I had to go through a big blah stage of like what is this feeling? Like why do I hate myself right now?
Huh.
You were productive over in terms of making music?
I just started making music right away.
Okay.
And I made an instrumental record. That was the first thing because I didn't know. I was in a similar boat from a lyrical perspective. I was like, I don't have that right now. I
Yeah.
don't have my regular. That was tied to live performance, and I was like, but I want to start. I want to play. And Josh Van Tassel was very keen on. And we were both, we're great friends, and we were both home, and I was trying to figure out the computer, and I was just kind of like, okay, I'll start playing, and then start building tracks, and then we made this instrumental record, and it was like the ultimate blessing. It was what I needed, and it was very different, but it was just about instinct and fun. And it loosened everybody up. Everybody that was involved in it was just doing it at night and at odd hours, and I think it helped all of us. And I was so inspired by it.
Yeah.
So it really it helped me a lot. I certainly was going through a similar thing, but that really kept me it really kept me going. It's funny because before the pandemic, 3 months before the pandemic, I was basically paralyzed. I was not, I was where you were, what you were saying about the energy. I was like, I'm done. I can't do it. I can't imagine doing a show. I can't imagine, you
So you
know,
love the shutdown. Shutdown.
I got a lot. I was shutting down.
Right.
I had shut down before the
Yeah.
shutdown happened. Then I found it hard, and now I'm coming. And I have found it very difficult in other ways, no doubt. And I see how hard it has been on. I see it all around me. That's the pain and everything.
Yeah.
But in terms of the space that it created, in many ways, it was helpful for me because I needed that. I needed to know. I
Mm,
needed things to say no for me because I was so bad at saying no.
I hear you. Yeah.
So bad at it. I was terrified of disappointing. That was my therapy breakthrough.
I relate to that too. That's a great breakthrough to have.
I was it was a it was like she took an arrow. She assessed me for a few days, and then she took an arrow and literally shot it into the bullseye of my heart, and I broke.
Well,
It was just like what they say, when one of those good moments happens, and it was like extraordinarily painful for a moment, and I bawled my eyes out, and then I was like, something opened up. It was like acupuncture.
yeah.
It was like as if she just took a needle and went whack, and I went oh, and then went oh my gosh. And a
Yeah.
lot of it had to do with this disappointment. I was terrified that I was going to disappoint everybody, my manager, the audience,
Mm,
my parents,
right.
Nina, my kids,
Right.
me. And again, it was about imagining what is the worst case if you were to disappoint them by saying no to something, or what would it look like? Of course, my worst was extraordinarily terrible,
Right.
not realistic.
Not realistic. Man. It's reminding me. Oh, I'm gonna plug my computer in at the same time as telling this story. It's reminding me of. Do you know Simon Wilcox?
Yeah,
I had a.
amazing lyricist, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah. Everybody says she's like the best.
There we go. You can still hear me the
Yep,
same.
yep.
Sorry, everyone. So she's the best lyricist, and can you still hear me, David?
Yep.
Oh no.
Why can you not hear me?
It's all good. We're gonna figure something out.
Yeah, I could hear you. I can see you and hear you.
Okay, I couldn't hear you. Um, so I went down to Nashville with Simon Wilcox, and we talked for about we talked and cried for about 4 or 5 hours about like childhood stuff. And I got to a place where, yeah, she said something that was so like the truth that I couldn't stop crying like a baby would cry. And she had to start like distracting me and being like, "Look at the wall!" Like just like a crazy amount of crying, considering like I don't know her at all. Um, and then a song came out that was "For Your Love," which is on this EP that I just have. And it's like after that, I could sort of talk about that topic or think about it or write about it, and I never had been able to previous to that. And it was for some reason just my sore spot that we just talked about. I just told her some things that were not even that bad when I think about it, just about how I felt as a kid in some moments. And it was so healing. And so I really relate to that, like the cry and then the being like, oh God, like it's out. No, it's still there, but it's out. It's like I can.
Yeah, you're not bearing it in the same way. You're not burying it underneath a whole bunch of other stuff, but you're not actually having to carry it. This is the kind of, it goes back to what we were saying before. Having to carry the hiding from these things is really tough as you go into the next decades. And again, it goes into the productivity thing. Someone could look at that time. Junior T was on the show recently. Like I had him on the podcast, and Junior T was like, "My sessions are 8 hours minimum, and I tell them not to expect anything." And I was like, I love that because, like, if you were talking about productivity, would someone say that conversation? You could look at that conversation and be like, "Well, you're wasting time. You're like talking about your feelings, and you're crying, and you're getting into these deep stories from your past. Let's just get onto the song." But that was the most productive thing you could have done. Do you know what I'm saying? Like productivity doesn't look like we think it does all the time.
That's exactly it. And that's the same as your vacation songwriting. And it's
Yeah,
like, it's not working hard doesn't have to be like productivity isn't like painful work. It's not like you don't have to feel like it's like sometimes it's just like, it's like being a human. Like whatever is making you be more human is like the work of a writer.
that's it. That's exactly it. I think that's part of the reason why meditation has been so good for me because it's completely traditionally speaking, one would think of it as being completely unproductive. You are not moving. You are not engaging in the production of anything, but an attempt to still your mind through your breath, which is very countercultural.
Yeah, I feel like that's why I can't do it. I'm just gonna plug this laptop in, David, and you can cut there if you need to, or I don't care if people listen to me. I'm just gonna switch the audio really quick, okay?
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
I just need to once this it's gonna connect to my Apollo, and I'm gonna unconnect it.
Yep.
Ba 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 ba. Zoom preferences. Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I could. Yeah, it was being weird.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
So as you were saying, yeah, I feel like that's why I can't meditate. Like I've tried to meditate before, and I last like 30 seconds. I'm like, oh, I'm one of those people that probably really needs it. Because as soon as I meditate,
Terrible at it. Terrible. It's
brutal.
it's painful, but I love it. I love it as an exercise because I realize I probably need it because of all of those things. I'm as hyper and have a short attention span, and I just set that time. But I'm kind of determined and stubborn, so
Right.
I set the timer, and I'm like, you can't tell me that I can't sit here for 5 minutes. Of course I can. I can do that. I started at 5, then you move it up, or you start at 2, and then you move it up 2 minutes. You're like, I can do 2 minutes. Come on, it's just sitting here. But the whole 2 minutes, you're like, I suck at this. I suck at this. I'm terrible at this. And what the thing I like about it is that then it teaches you to be kind to yourself. Because the only way you can sit through that 2 minutes is if you start going, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's
Right.
okay that my mind's wandering. It's okay that I find this really hard. And then the practice helps with kindness to
Mm,
myself. That voice that goes, "You suck," because that's what's happening when I'm sitting there when I started it. I'm going, "Why can't I do this? I'm terrible at this. Why does my mind wander?"
yeah.
And then there's another voice comes in that goes, "Just relax. It's okay." And that's a helpful voice to have in my life. That's a helpful voice.
Yeah, I'm gonna try a little harder. Like I feel like I like yoga for that, but it's also because I'm like, oh, when I'm being productive, I'm like stretching out my limbs and I'm being silent. But I gotta give that another go for sure.
I mean, I love it. I love it. It's been very helpful for me. Just the timer is the key. No timer.
Yeah,
you're endless. You're in this endless void of questioning whether you're at the time or not.
right, right.
But and start small and be kind to yourself always. That's what. Oh, Ria, this has been
It's been
great.
fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I listened to all of these episodes and I actually got excited because I'm like three behind.
Ooh.
So I got really excited today to catch up. But yeah, I love this podcast. I love what you're doing. So
Oh, thank you. Good luck with all the. Hey, good luck with the shows. Keep that energy.
yes, yeah,
Keep that good energy. We'll both work on that.
yeah. Hopefully, I'll see you in an airport again soon, and
I hope
I'll have
so.
energy, and you'll have your normal face on, and it'll be we'll
Exactly. I won't have facial hives, and we'll both be big bags of energy, of glowing energy.
bags of energy.
Say
Awesome.
hi to your beautiful family for me.
I will. All
Right
right.
on. Thanks, Ria. Take care.